Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Silvers, founder of Million Mamas, that's MAMAS movement, which is an organization that is dedicated to empowering and educating the women who mother and their children so that we can have a kind and just world and evolve a different society where the women and the children and families are cherished. Today, welcome to my master series of interviews, and I'm so delighted because I have two amazing moms with me, two homeschooling experts, moms that between the two of them, they have 19 years of advocacy for homeschooling and expertise as moms who homeschool their children. So let me introduce them to you. So when Windi Eklund is a longtime, that's Wendy, is a longtime homeschool mom with a passion for child-centered education, me too, and family support. She's been homeschooling for over 11 years through the public charter system. Her two youngest are currently enrolled in an independent study public charter school. And this year, they moved their oldest out of the charter, and they now homeschool him independently through a PSA. So we're going to find out what a PSA is. And since starting their homeschool journey as a family, Wendy's dedicated herself to being an integral part of the unique and diverse community. She has worked to broaden educational choices and knowledge of the programs available to families through, and I'll tap into those, but let me just tell you, she's quite the accomplished homeschooling mom. So you are in
really
great
don't
hands.
Talk about myself.
Well, today you might have to just say
right.
just at least a little bit, okay? And so she's just here to support homeschooling families and finding their path, and she's amazing. And then I have another amazing mama with us, and that's Ronna, Yelin. And she has been on the homeschooling path with her husband of 16 years and daughter of 14 years. That's hilarious, Ronna. I like the way you said that. And she's been enrolled with the independent study model through a public charter school for 9 years and has been working as a family liaison for an independent study public charter since 2018. She connects current and new families, children, vendors, and resources, whether one homeschools through an independent study public school, private school affidavit, private satellite school program, or private tutor. So she is a homeschooling mama offering information from her experience, and both of them are here to just share their experience, their strength, their hope, their inspiration. Nobody is offering any services, so just pull up a chair or a couch and a blanket, get a cup of tea, cup of joe, some water, and a journal, and just take notes. Just be with us today because of COVID-19, there are many parents who may not have chosen the homeschooling path, but have been forced to homeschool. And I know I have spoken with a lot of mamas that are like, and papas, they're like, oh my God, I didn't sign up for this. So the first question that I want to ask you both is, why homeschool? Why did you choose homeschooling? Either one.
Sure. Okay, I'll go. So we early on, our family was a part of the attachment parenting movement. So we learned about homeschooling through some of the families that had 5 and 6-year-olds, and our daughter was merely a baby. And my husband and I thought we liked what we saw and we liked what we were experiencing because our play dates and meetups at the farmers markets and those kinds of things had these older siblings, and my daughter ended up becoming friends with the younger siblings. Mm-hmm. So it was just an extension of that, and several families did go on a private or public school path, and then others went on the homeschooling path. So we ended up going on that path. That's what got us started.
Okay.
And I differ from Ronna a little bit in that I thought that my children would take the traditional route and go to school. I was raised going to school. I never thought that I would be a homeschool mom, but it was my oldest son, who's now 16, that decided we were going to homeschool. He was super shy and had delayed speech. And so we started with the traditional path, and I knew that a large classroom in a public school wouldn't work for him. So we paid for a private school for him. And even though he was only doing 2 days a week at a little preschool, he was crying every single day and so stressed about going to school. And then the pediatrician and the teachers and the admin at the school were like, no, he needs to be going every day. If he's going every day, he'll get used to it. It'll be better for him. And so I, of course, was listening to the experts. So then we did kindergarten every day, and same thing, crying every day. After a couple of months, I ended up being in the classroom every day, wearing my next one, Hudson. And by the end of that, he'd given himself a stomach ulcer. And at that point, the pediatrician was like, you need to find a different path. This is not going to work for him. So he's why we homeschool. And then my 2 younger ones have followed in his path, and we love homeschooling. We've embraced homeschooling. I let them decide if they want to try school or if they want to keep homeschooling, and they all want to keep homeschooling. So that's why we do it.
That's wonderful. So often you will hear people say, well, what about the socialization? Can you speak to that?
Well, that one always cracks me up. And I don't want to sound rude, but I always reply with, well, I don't really understand how being in a classroom is socialization, because if you're in a classroom, you're with all kids of the same age, from the same demographics, from your neighborhood, with one adult in that classroom. Our children are with kids of all ages. My kids go with me everywhere. They have experience with docents at museums who are much older, with all this different knowledge. I feel like my children are far more socialized than a child that's in a classroom just learning to get along with their same age group.
Wow, that makes so much sense.
I think so. But I get that question all the time, and I always kind of just chuckle, and I'm like, well.
Yeah, because Ronna, I'll let you answer, and then
Sure. So the other thing is that does seem to be a very large myth. I agree with what Wendy shared. And then the whole, our kids are out all the time, but with other kids. There's park days, there are classes, and it's interest-based, and sometimes it's parent-led, not just child-led, but it depends on your philosophy, which I know we'll probably get into, the family's philosophy, the child's philosophy, the learning style. So you can pick and choose what works for you and what doesn't. And again, depending on your financial situation, you can pay a heck of a lot of money or do it on a shoestring budget.
Right.
You can be a single mom, or dad, a grandparent. It's just, anyone can do it if it's their heart's desire or if they're unfortunately forced into it. Because we don't want that. We want to support anyone. Even right now, many people are forced into it, as we know. But they're also doing the schools program with homeschooling. We can choose any curriculum we want, or any lifestyle or learning path.
And how would people learn? Would they go to either of you for guidance and information? How could somebody find out more about what's available?
They could absolutely reach either of us, and we can give them all the resources they want or need. We give some people a little at a time. It just depends on the individual and what they're looking for. We're just being supportive out there. We know there's so many, we've been doing this for a while, and we just like to help support people on the path. And just because our paths look different and they're always changing, which to me is the beauty of homeschooling. You might read about a philosophy and say, I want to be an unschooler, or I want to do Montessori every day with my kids, or Waldorf. I consider our family eclectic. We take what we like and leave the rest, and it's always evolving. And because we do only have one child, it's, every situation is different as far as how you can evolve. Families with multiple children might do unit studies and just dive a little deeper with the child who's either more interested or just more able to handle it developmentally.
How do you structure your days? And also, I was going to ask you about unschooling. My daughter went from the time she was 2.5 until she was 11.5. She went to a school that was, it was a kind of an unschooling school. Right. And I loved it because it was, and still remains, very child-centered, very, very focused on the emotional and social intelligence, which I think are the foundational intelligences of a healthy human being, and very self-directed and self-regulated with a container. And so you just mentioned about unschooling is that a lot of times people will think that homeschooling is kind of like where the wild beasts are. Like, what do you have to say to that?
Well, like Ronna was saying, there's multiple methods. So homeschooling is not unschooling. Unschooling is just one homeschool style that a family can choose if they want to. I will tell you that I started out more as a classical or a school at home type homeschool mom, and we are now unschoolers. I don't know if, I think it probably, we became more unschoolers when I started working, but I have noticed that my middle child, he really fought. He didn't want to sit and listen. Hudson would sit, and Athen would sit on his little bouncy ball and do lessons with me, but Hudson wanted nothing to do with that. He had no interest in me teaching him to read. He was going to just butt heads with me about everything. And he is 12 now, and he taught himself to read. He wanted to be online doing Minecraft with his brother, and so they talk in the chat, and he taught himself to read using Minecraft. So, but then my daughter, who is 7 now, she will come to me with her books and be like, I want to do this math lesson today, Mom. So, Athen I had to direct. Hudson, I had to leave alone, and Bailey, she's directing me. So I think you do whatever works for your family. And I do know there's large families, and they are more structured, and they, the older kids help with the younger kids. So it is about finding that right path for your family.
Okay. That's so helpful. That's so interesting. It just goes to show you how each child, they come into the world with this inner awareness. And, I think the optimal kind of parenting is really being in tune and attuned to who the being in front of you is. I mean, it's just so great when you have, more than one child, because you really get to see that. We get to see that they're all so different, and they have different, just like Howard Gardner talks about in terms of multiple intelligences. They all learn differently. Yes. So I heard you talk about Minecraft, and right? And so a lot of questions that I get in my parent coaching, a lot of parents lament about screen time. And there's also a misconception for people that homeschool, that the kids are they're just on screens all day long. Can you speak to that?
Well, I don't feel like, okay, maybe right now they're on screens a lot more because we can't go really out of our homes, but a normal homeschool schedule for us is a lot of field trips, a lot of activities. We are out in the world every single day. So they don't have that much time to be on their screens. I will tell you right now, my 2 boys are super excited that this COVID-19 thing is going on because their school friends are at home and able to play online. So they just started channels, they've been streaming, they've been engaging with their friends that way. And I'm not concerned about controlling that time because I feel like they're learning a really cool skill. They're teaching themselves, their little group of 7 or 8 boys, they're teaching themselves how to have their own YouTube channel. They branched into Twitch last night and started their own Twitch channels. They're learning tech skills that I'm not teaching them. They're learning it all on their own. And we don't know what the future is going to entail. And we know that it's going to probably be digital. So if I'm not wanting my children on the screen, am I hurting them and not letting them experience that and teach themselves those things? So I don't tend to worry about it.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because the Waldorf and a lot of, excuse me, early childhood educators really believe that for the first 7 to 8 years, a child really should not be exposed to media. But when you homeschool, you get to decide. And even I believe even Ronna, have you done a little bit of Waldorf as well at home?
Earlier on, we did.
Yeah. It's beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful.
Yeah.
I love the rhythms. I love the rhythms.
Yeah, we definitely took things that we liked from things that I studied alternative education and things that I liked. And I thought, oh, this is fun. I have a child and we're home. Let's incorporate these things and see how they work. But I definitely am into and continue to take what I like and leave the rest. And, you know, we didn't have much media at all until really for our daughter until a few years ago when it became important to her. And then we did support her when she was ready to communicate with people and want to, you know, stay connected. And it's interesting because as homeschoolers, if you're not willing to commute, that they stay in touch mostly through these phones. Because we have friends all over the country, state, and world. But even within, you know, our best friends moved to Orange County. Wendy's our other group of best friends. They're in Orange County and we're in LA County. So it's just an easier way to stay in touch. So for that, my daughter does it more for communicating than gaming and Minecraft. She's joined a few groups just to stay in touch with friends, and it's actually not her thing. So she's more the artsy type, as you know, more of an artist.
Yes.
Even
she's a dancer, right?
Yeah. But she likes to draw and she likes music and just to, you know, that's more her speed. But she will prefer to be with friends. So, you know, she joined the Minecraft for a little while, and I thought that's good. She could learn some coding and things like that. But it's not her thing. So why be attached to that either? But again, yeah, we haven't had much of an issue with her whenever she can connect with someone. We try to support that.
Yeah, I don't have to tell them to get off under normal circumstances. They're not spending that much time on there normally. But again, we're not right now living in a normal circumstance where we're stuck in the house. That's not normal for us.
However, we do have friends. I know Windi does that, and their kids are online a lot. And for some parents, they're okay with it, and sometimes they're not. So they just work on, you know, well, let's shift some things and get them out more. Maybe they are more homebodies, right? And they focus on getting their kids out more. Wendy's kids and my kids love going out and doing field trips and exploring. That's they're into nature and the arts and all that kind of stuff, the museums and the shows. So, you know, some people are in different situations, and I think when the parents support it, when they don't limit it, it is more of an unschooling philosophy. They end up regulating themselves, but sometimes children, of course, need help self-regulating. But that's where we learn to find the balance and support each other. And homeschooling parents reach out generally to other homeschooling parents, and we just support each other. There's a huge tribe, and
that's wonderful.
And of all different levels, philosophies, people have been doing this for 20 and 30 years that have, you know, kids in their 20s and 30s. We are friends with kids that were homeschooled. They're younger than I am, but they're maybe 10 years younger. They were homeschooled and they're out in this community now. And it's just really kind of neat to see as well. And some of them do it differently. Some of them were actually either did more school at home or were very free on the unschooling side, and they'll do the opposite. Well, I was too free, or I had too much of this. And you know, you just have to find out what works. If you feel like whatever happened in your past didn't work for you, sometimes people want to transfer the shift, but we meet all kinds of people doing this and supporting each other. So that's the beauty. If there's new people listening in and want to start this journey, once you dive in, there will be a lot of support. I am seeing a lot of long-term homeschoolers saying this is homebound schooling, and they don't want the new people coming into this, whether it was because of COVID-19 or many other reasons, people will leave school mid-year. We don't want the message to be this is what it would be like, because currently, I think I shared this before, but if they're doing any kind of school at home on their tablets, if they have one, or a computer from the school, it's whatever the school's providing. There's no choice in education in the curriculum and their learning style. So it would look differently once things change and we can leave our homes again.
Because then you're focused on checking off the lessons that your teacher is assigning you based on that whole entire classroom, instead of following your child's interest or following the style of homeschooling that you've chosen. So it's very, very different.
So I want to ask a question, because Wendy, did you start a particular homeschooling brand or course?
I started the homeschool program at Inspire Charter School. So when I started working for Inspire Charter Schools, it had its online program, which was its virtual school. They called it the main program, and that was where the children could choose from a couple of different online programs And then they had, I believe, access to $1,000 to be able to do enrichment activities through the school through vendors. And then they also had what they called back then their specialty program, which was when they partnered with vendors in the area to bring 2 days of learning to students. So before Inspire started their specialty program, it was really hard for a homeschool family using their access to their charter school funds through the school to get through a whole year's worth of classes. You kind of run out of funding before the end of the year, and then you're having to pay out of pocket to finish your math class or to finish your science class or whatever it is your class is, which can get expensive because a lot of homeschool families are single income because one parent has chosen to stay home to educate the child and the other parent is working to support the family. So that gets hard. So Inspire did that specialty program that helped students get all the way through the school year at their vendors. And then there's a more traditional homeschool type program that's at a lot of charter schools, and that's what I had been part of at my past charter schools. And so I brought that program to Inspire charter schools with some tweaks that I felt like made it a little more homeschool friendly than the programs that I had experienced in the past. We tried to really understand where homeschool parents are coming from. The family liaison team was one of the things that I founded with that program. It was really important to me that we had that line of communication. I always thought of it as bringing information from the bottom up because we're here to serve families, and schools typically information is very top down. And so I wanted to constantly be in contact with our families, knowing what they wanted, knowing how we were doing, knowing if there was problems. So yeah, that was kind of one of the tweaks that I did to make sure that our families had a voice.
That's wonderful. So now, if let's just say a parent is forced to homeschool right now, and some parents don't feel like they have the temperament, but they can't go out and they can't interact. What are the steps? Like I've seen some of my friends, like they'll post on a, like a flip chart. So we did our stuff, we're done. And it's like, now what? Where do we go? So what would you say to like brand new parent that's just been thrown into this homeschool experience? What are the steps that they need to take to learn, to get up to speed, and to choose what's right for them?
Well, I think that's—
I know, like in 2 seconds or less, right?
I think that's really hard because I think the majority of people are going to be putting their children back into the school that is closed right now. And so they're probably going to need to do that work. Whereas if you were truly a homeschool mom and you didn't like— I kind of have a funny story about that. When Athen was little, like probably our second year homeschooling, I could not get him to do math. Like just couldn't. He wouldn't do it. I tried everything. He was going to have nothing to do with that book. I called my teacher that I was matched with that worked at the charter school in tears. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. We're not going to have any math assignments for you this month. We're going to be in trouble. I can't get him to do this. I want to put him back in school. Like, I didn't start homeschooling so I could fight with my child. I don't want to fight with my child. So she said to me on the phone, she goes, Wendy, just throw the damn math book away. And I'm like, what? You can do that? So she's like, yeah. And so that's when I started investigating other things, living math, watching math videos online, doing math in everyday life. So we just gave up the traditional way of learning math and embraced following the things that he was interested in math, cooking, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's hard because I knew at that point, I'm not putting him back in school. I need to find another route to teach him these things that he needs. But if you're going to be putting your child back in that school, they're going to need to keep up, but also keep in mind that every parent is at home probably fighting with their child. So if your kid's not getting that lesson done, you're not the only child. There's going to be a lot of makeup. And at the beginning of every school year, they review the information from the year before. So I wouldn't fight with my child. I'd say, I'm sorry, teacher, we could not get that lesson done. They can do it next year, because I think the relationship with the family is so much more important than fighting about your times tables or whatever it is. It comes like I said with my middle child, he fought with me, didn't want to learn to read. He reads great. So I want to respect that relationship between us. I know we fight about things, but all families fight, but I just don't want to be that overlord making sure that they're doing that. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, to me, it makes perfect sense because, I mean, as a heart-centered parenting coach for 18 plus years, my focus has always been on connection matters more than anything.
Right.
Because that's what's going, when you establish that connection and when you empower your children to make their own choices, to self-direct, to help them self-direct.
Yeah, to support them in that. Right.
To cultivate discernment.
Right.
You're growing a citizen of the world who is really healthy and functioning. And so I'm with you 100%. And go ahead, Ronna.
I was going to say, so, and then in the adjustment period for families who are trying this out, even though it could and would and has potential to look completely different, should read up on deschooling, everything they can. It's about the adjustment time of really leaving that model behind.
Even deschooling?
DE schooling.
Thank you.
And a lot of times people say it's an adjustment time for the whole family. For instance, I was taught that early on when my daughter was very young, when we were on this path to read what you can on it, because my husband and I went to public school as well. So the child's the actual one going through it, not, as far as this is her life, this is all she knows. We know it from the parent side of it. So I learned a lot about that, to let go of what those ideas were, to have an optimal experience, to be open to all kinds of other options on the path instead of this traditional only path, which some families come around to. They want a traditional school at home environment, and that works for them for whatever reasons, or even if it doesn't, that's the way it is, whether it works for everyone or not. And then a word that came early on that I really liked about deschooling and eclectic homeschooling and unschooling is interdependent. So it's not just child-led. This is interdependence. I have to be comfortable and happy with it too.
Right.
And a few things that old timers, I want to say more experienced homeschoolers said early on, as long as you're doing enough with your child, it might not be every single day, but just at the end of the day, if you can go to sleep at night and just feel okay, it's because you may want to be where you're not, which is, I want to be this relaxed unschooler or homeschooler, and then really if I'm having heart palpitations and can't sleep at night because my daughter might not know math, whatever this chapter is, or fractions at this age that they say they're supposed to at a certain time, because they will get what they need when they need it. And people talk about the gaps and the holes, and everyone has them who goes to school too. No one retains all of the information that they, even if they do well on tests, they just do well, regurgitate it and move on. And we remember what's important, or we remember or dig deeper into things that interest us. And that's the self-directed learning is that we do as adults. What do we look up? I want to go do some container gardening. I'm going to look up what I can and start doing that. If I don't have that experience or knowledge.
How do you address the testing? I mean, I have my own opinion about standardized testing, but do homeschoolers have to meet certain standards to get credit? How does that work?
That depends on the type of homeschooling you're doing. So if you're homeschooling through a charter school, you are keeping up with state standards. You're working very closely with your assigned teacher who's tracking the concepts you've covered against the state standards, and you are required to do the standardized testing. And the schools also have a benchmark testing that they do for their accreditation and for their authorizers. So you are asked to do quite a bit of testing in a public charter school. If you're homeschooling independently by filing your own PSA or through—
What's a PSA?
A PSA is a private school affidavit. So in California, you either homeschool, there's actually no such thing as homeschooling. You're either enrolled in a public school or you're enrolled in a private school. And so a parent can independently go online to the CDE's website and file the PSA, which is the affidavit stating that you are a private school and you have children enrolled. And then there's also an option to hire a certified teacher, and then you don't have to fill out any paperwork. But if you're homeschooling independently, then you do not have to do any of the state testing or the benchmark testing. There's a lot of homeschool parents that do PSAs that still benchmark test their children to make sure that they're on track with making achievements. But that's, again, something that's completely up to you guys. I am not such a fan of testing. In fact, even though we've been in charter schools for years, my oldest son, his 3rd grade year, he did the testing, the state testing, and went there and was fine. The 2nd year with the charter school, he freaked out, wouldn't go in, had a panic attack, and was, and his teacher said, no, we're not doing this, just take him home. And we opted out every year since then. So legally you're allowed to opt out.
Oh, you are allowed. Okay.
At any school.
Even in public school, you're allowed.
Even public school,
yeah.
But you can't legally opt out of the benchmark testing. Benchmark testing isn't based on the state. It's based on the accreditation for the school and the authorizer. So the problem is, if we all opt out of our testing at the charter schools, the schools are going to get shut down because they need that data to show that their students are making progress. So it's kind of a catch-22. You legally can opt out, but if you do, your school might get closed.
So do you remember when there was this big, I have so many other questions about this, but remember when there was the big uproar about public schools and charter schools? It was about a year and a half, and there was a big vote. So in a charter school like Inspired, is there a brick and mortar place for it, or is it homeschool charter school?
Inspired Charter Schools is an independent study charter school.
Okay,
so it does not have locations where you go and bring your child for learning. There are charter schools that have blended programs, and there's a blended program is where you might take your child 1 day or 2 days a week or 3 days a week. And then there's brick and mortar charter schools where the children go there 5 days a week. So even with charter schools, there's so many variations on what a student is offered.
So if you have Inspired, if your child is registered through Inspired Charter Schools and they eliminated charter schools, what would happen to Inspired Charter School? Would it still go on because it's not brick and mortar, or how does that work?
Okay, so are you talking about like the legislators eliminating charter schools? Or are you talking about authorizer revoking a charter?
Yes, remember when a lot of people were up in Sacramento because they were right? I know. Yes, you were. I was being.
Yes.
So what was that about, and what does that portend for homeschooling going forward? Because the rest of the school year is done, according to the states. So kids are home until next year. So what do you feel is the next thing to happen with regard to homeschool? What do you think holds for homeschool?
Well, I think that's a complicated question, because traditional homeschoolers who file a PSA and are homeschooling independently, there's a lot of them that feel like those of us that use a charter school that we're not technically homeschoolers. So we're technically public school students. So there's all this kind of unrest within the homeschool community, because I was part of a charter school my whole entire time, and I identify as a homeschool mom. If you ask me on the streets and you meet me and you know nothing about homeschool and you know nothing about charter schools, and I constantly am telling people, oh, I am homeschooling my kids. People keep asking, how's the COVID-19 thing working for you? Are you going stir crazy because your kids are at home? And I'm like, no, I'm a homeschool mom. My kids are always at home. I love them being here. So I always say I'm a homeschool mom. So that's kind of one of the things. So the legislators, I don't think they quite understood, or they weren't aware that we as homeschool parents, there's a lot of us that weren't, I wasn't comfortable homeschooling and just jumping right into filing a PSA, because I never thought I was going to be a homeschool mom. I wanted support. I wanted someone else keeping my records. I didn't want to keep those records. So I joined a charter school, even though I wanted to homeschool. I wanted that support. So the legislators, I just don't think were aware that there was, hundreds and thousands of us that were homeschooling through the public school system. So when they became aware of that, kind of upset them. So we had those bills last year. I think when they first came after the charter schools, they were looking at, oh, charter schools are taking money away from our public school children, Well, we're all public school children. We all as parents are we're paying our taxes, we're paying for the public school system. So if we're choosing to put our kids in a charter school, that's still our taxpayer money paying for that charter school.
Mm-hmm.
So where was I going with that? Anyways, so those bills that were there last spring, were about putting a moratorium. What ended up happening is they put a moratorium only on independent study charter schools. So we can't have any more schools like Inspire charter schools that come into the state for the next 2 years. But brick and mortar charter schools where the kids come 5 days a week, those are still allowed to be authorized. That was a very roundabout way of explaining that.
It's perfect.
Okay.
I was with you the whole way.
Oh, good.
Yeah, the whole way.
And then it sounds like you were possibly asking, well, what would happen if that option goes away completely? Then most parents are at the, ready to do the private school affidavit or independent study satellite program too, which someone else can still keep your records, and you usually do pay a nominal fee and they do the basics for you. So if you're just as a parent brand new and you do want to be independent, but you want someone else to help you keep the records and that kind of thing, but you don't want to be part of the public school system. Right. So they could do that now, or the parent, if at some point the charters are no longer, we never know how long anything can last.
Right.
Thank you for answering that, because it was something really on my heart, because I remember how hard you worked on that, and how you were up there, like a lot of us have been up there.
We were all up there together.
We're all up there.
Visiting our legislators, exercising our rights as citizens of the world to, have choice and freedom.
Right. But we don't have to have charter schools in order to homeschool. So
that's
you
what I
have
wanted.
the PSA option and the PSP option. So.
Yes, which is wonderful. So in terms of a child graduating and going on to college, how does that work with a homeschool child?
Ronna, do you want to take that first?
Sure.
Okay.
It goes beautifully. So, so many students will do concurrent or dual enrollment, like a lot of our public and private school kids do. Mm-hmm. And they chip away at some classes so they can, get their high school and working into getting some of the college requirement classes. And a lot of them transfer, and then some know it's a going backward situation for some families. If they know their path and they want to go to a four-year university, then you plan for it. And there are definitely several experts in that field, from high school to college, and just high school only, and people that support. And we can share those resources with you later. And we can send you a lot of resources so they can help support families do that. Or they might want to go to a trade school, but you're asking about college. So, so college, you can you can do the AA thing and transfer, or you can just go right to there. Okay, so we're very well received in general, and there are certain colleges that are very happy to have homeschoolers, and there's a list of them, and it keeps growing, and it's just not a problem. It's a good thing. It can separate you from the rest, actually. In some instances,
I would think so, because of the original thinking aspect, because the high rate of being able to have critical assessment and original thinking has got to be higher with kids that are homeschooled in the main, rather than kids that have still really bright children that go to public school or private school, but are basically led down the path of what they should think and how they should respond to things. That's my sense of it. And
so when you're doing a college application, you're trying to make yourself look unique. The best way I feel like to look unique is to be an independent homeschooler who has done a variety of things and has this amazing portfolio of all of the things that you've done. Whereas if you've come, even as a graduate of a independent study charter school, is coming into the application process as a public school student, not as a homeschool student. Just so the PSA students are coming into that process as a kind of a different path than any child that's graduated from a public high school.
I love what you said, both of you, about this being, you talked about taxpayers. I don't think that a lot of public school parents realize that if you homeschool or if you do public or charter, you're paying anyway.
Right.
I think there's that misconception that you're taking something from us. So you need to fall in line and walk with us this way, because otherwise we're not going to get what we need. Our kids aren't going to get what we need.
Right.
But in truth, either way, we're paying.
Right. I think that became really apparent to me when I was a child, because I went to private Christian school. And when we moved out to Orange County when I was in 6th grade, I was taken from my school where I had gone forever and went to public middle school. And it was a huge culture shock. And the math teacher that I had, I was at the school for 2 weeks. The math teacher that I had accused me of stealing the teacher's manual off of her desk. It was the teacher's manual for a class that I was not even in. And this is middle school. She found the teacher's manual in the desk that I sat in 1 period a day and accused me of doing it. And I came there mid-year. We went and talked to the principal. My mom was like, you don't understand. My daughter has never been in trouble. Like, and the principal was not, what is it called when you get kicked out of school for like 3 days?
Suspended.
He was going to
expelled or suspended.
Yeah, but not kicked out forever, but kicked out for 3 days because I'd stolen this book, and they did not want to listen to my mom. The math teacher came in and said to my mother, well, is she your oldest? You haven't had like a teenager yet. You don't know what you're in for. She just had this horrible opinion about what children were. And my mom, they were like happy that we had moved to this area with better schools, that they wouldn't have to keep paying for private school and paying their taxes. And they had to put me back in private school because my mom wasn't going to put me back in this woman's classroom who clearly thinks horrible things about kids that she's teaching. And then I went back to private school, and then till I finished that grade, or till I finished middle school. And then I went to public high school. I went to Troy High School. And funny enough, like my junior year, these 2 boys came up to me and told me that they had put the book in my desk. Yeah. So my parents were paying for a private school, and they did try and put me in public school, and it was not a good experience. I was like attacked by a teacher and a principal that didn't want to listen to my side. And so my parents they were paying for private school, and they were paying their taxes. So
what progressive parents you had that they listened to you.
Right.
I mean, how many parents do? I mean, that's one of the things that's very upsetting, is that that idea that if an adult says something, they're right.
Right. Well, my argument was, honestly, if I'm going to steal the teacher's manual, I'm going to steal it for the class I'm in, so I at least can get the answers that I want. And I'm not dumb enough to put it in my desk. I'm going to put it in my backpack and take it home. But I hadn't stolen the book. So yeah, I mean, that's
right.
Age.
Yeah. Right. Which just speaks to what happens when you have a different style of education, and how wonderful to have options.
Right.
So for everyone who's joined us today, and for those that are watching this replay, I really want you to go back and listen to what Windi and Ronna are talking about, because the opportunity for you, should you choose to homeschool, and while you are homeschooling now, though they are different, are vast. Even if you don't think that you have the temperament to be a homeschooling parent, what I'm hearing both moms say is that you can work with that too. So how do you work with that? For those moms and dads that feel like, I can't be a homeschooler parent. My kid drives me crazy.
That's where the deschooling comes into play, because what you're thinking about being a homeschooling parent is that school looks a certain way at home. You're putting your children at the kitchen table and you're getting through those textbooks. That's not necessarily what homeschooling looks like. And you may find that I feel like I'm learning new things with my kids every single day. I love homeschooling because I'm also learning, and I get to enjoy my kids, and we've reconnected. I think part of the stress of having a child home right now is that, even think about your homework. Your child is going to school all day long, then they're coming home and they have homework, and then you're fighting about homework. When you're homeschooling, it's all very natural and you're learning together. You're not fighting over that subject that needs to be completed right then. So you probably do have the personality that it takes to homeschool. You're just not actually getting to experience it because you're stuck in this like confine of what education looks like in America.
Perfect. Ronna, did you want to add to that?
Yeah. Yeah, I was also, and I completely 100% agree. However, that can be a process, as Wendy shared, that was her process. Something that can help is literally hire a tutor, and there are free tutors if you're feeling, especially for older kids, and even younger, if you're just feeling it's a certain subject where there is, maybe it's just math because that's the frustration, or maybe you want them to learn a foreign language with someone who actually is a native, and it doesn't just necessarily have to be an online program. And there's just ways to just take a little weight off a parent, and even join a co-op where different parents teach different subjects, or sometimes they actually do hire a teacher. And again, some of it does depend on just your resources financially, and even just who do you know that knows this. And if you have a friend that's an aerospace engineer, they might get to do some science with them. A parent may want to do that, and someone else shares something else. Even they might be good at organic cooking or gardening. So people trade services and trade ideas. But yeah, it's a process. The deschooling is very, very important. And even if all of that says, okay, I read all that and that sounds interesting, but we're literally doing every subject and that's how it's going to be. And it might even start out that way and evolve into how Wendy and I are choosing, and our family's path has led us to homeschool. And I did want to say mention just a couple books that were helpful to me. They're
yes, please.
The first one, when I just scoured the library, I really got back into the library after a break when we did have our daughter. So Dave Alpert wrote a book, Homeschooling and the Voyage of Self-Discovery. And again, I can send these to you, but it's
Please,
Dave.
I'd love to offer the links.
Yeah.
Dave Alpert, Albert. And he has another book called And the Skylark Sings with Me, Adventures in Homeschooling and Community-Based Education for Self-Directed Learning. So we did a baby naming late for our daughter, a non-traditional one, after she was a year, and it was right in the timeline that I read that book. And the intro, and I was looking for it this morning, and I couldn't find it, but the intro or prologue, he writes, it's either called The Guest, I think it's called The Guest or The Visitor. And it's just about how we invited them into when we choose to have a child, we invite them in. They are our guest, and how do you want to treat them? And just and then how he fell into homeschooling with his two daughters. And I loved their style. I mean, our daughter was still so young, but I'm like, that's kind of a philosophy I like, because it was very, self-directed, yet there were certain things like they're going to learn a foreign language and they're going to learn an instrument, even if they don't do it their whole life. And we were like a lot like that early on too. And it's just really, I read it at the baby naming, and I'm going to find it or buy the book again. It's at my local library, but that was really special. And he has a whole bunch of books. And then anything by John Taylor Gatto, Dumbing Us Down, Underground History of American Education. And then John Holt, who is known to be the father of unschooling, How Children Learn, Escape from Childhood, Teach Your Own. So I'll send you those
Wonderful.
things.
Oh, that's so great.
I would say for the parents, read, get anything. And even if it doesn't resonate, then find another book. Just get what you can on your online free library books or whatever sources you use to get books. Anything they can get their hands on, especially if they want to continue doing it, but even how to just try to stay calm. There's lots of books that are essays and how we did it, or success stories of high schools, or 10 kids that went to college that homeschooled. And you'll see there's like gymnasts and athletes and, again, aerospace people. And I like those books because you can say, well, look, there's so many successful people, but I also like to say, that's okay if your kid wants to not be this. The success is defined in so many different ways, but it does help prove a point where people are like, well, what are they going to go to high school? Are they going to go to college? It's like, oh, look, X and so homeschooled. However, I just like the idea of if they might want to go into a trade and just to be supported on whatever their next journey is. And we know that college doesn't serve many anyway, and you end up with a huge debt. So if you can do the transfer thing and knock out the dual enrollment is really helpful, because the community college classes are free. So
I think we might have to have a part 2 about that.
I know. Also, check out a book that I found really interesting called Colleges That Change Lives.
yeah.
Yeah, so check that out. And then I know, since we're all stuck at home, I know I personally have been binge watching some shows, but I have a couple of documentaries that I strongly suggest. I've already watched them, so I haven't watched them again since COVID-19 started. But Class Dismissed, Self-Taught.
What was the second one?
Self-Taught. So Class Dismissed, they're both by Jeremy Stewart. And then Self-Taught is the follow-up to Class Dismissed. And then my favorite one that really spoke to me, not only about schooling, but also kind of our lifestyle here in America, is called The Race to Nowhere.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I have 2 parting questions for you. Is one, in order to homeschool somebody, is it possible for somebody to have a career and homeschool, or does a parent need to not have a career in order to homeschool?
I feel like we have homeschool parents that have careers and still homeschool. There's just so many options and so many support systems now that you can do it. I'm going to say it's probably more work, because you're going to have to be relying on other people while you're at work. If you work from home, it's obviously much easier, but it can be done. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then, okay, thank you, Ronna. And so how can people reach out to you? I'm going to leave your links, and when I send out an email, I'll include with this video, I'll include it. So anybody who's watching this, if you are not on the Million Mamas Movement email list, please go to www.millionmamas.movement.org and just leave your email so I can make sure that you get all of these replays. And how do people reach you, just as we're closing?
I think both Ronna and I love helping new families come into homeschooling. And so I always just make my cell phone number available. It's 714-310-2213. And you can call me or text me. And I love talking to new homeschool parents. I think that there's something to be said for that end of like being able to listen. I remember my very first teacher at Julian Charter School. She spent over an hour with me on the phone, just listening to like my troubles with Athen in school and how I thought he learned. And that way I can custom tailor a list of things that I think might help you. I can look things up in your area and help you. So there's a lot of support groups online as well, social media groups for homeschooling. But if you feel like you really need to share your story and get some information about some paths that might help you, let Ronna and I know. Ronna's the same, but I don't know how you want them to get a hold of you, Ronna, so I won't speak to that, but we're here to help.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Ronna?
Hi, yes, I will call or text 310-951-5660. That's 310-951-5660. Call or text, and we can set up a time to talk.
Yeah.
You're both so beautiful and very brave to leave your cell phones publicly. So, wow, you know, I bow to you, because you'll be getting lots of calls, I'm sure. Thank you. Thank you for
having us, Wendy.
Thank you so much. Thanks for all you do, both of you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You too, Ronna.
Very inspiring.
Yeah, you too, both of you. You know, we do it for the kids. We do it for the children,
and to support each other.
Right? Yes, and to support each other, because together we rise, together we thrive.
Yes.
So
exactly.
All right. So
thank you.
Many blessings to you both, and I look forward to speaking with you soon. My pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody in Facebook land.
That's right. Bye.
Bye.